So in our system, you have the capability to set up process controls associated with particular batches. So if you set up these process controls, your operators will be prompted at a predetermined time interval to perform a process control, so a check of an input of some sort of data. So in order to set up a new process control in the system, you come to the batches page and you click on this plus sign down the bottom right. You then click on this top option, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see the option to add a new process control. So you got to give this a name. So I will say check cooler temperature and a description. So we'll get that just quite a similar for argument's sake in this tutorial. So then you add the control associated with this name. So you give this a name again, and then the trigger time. So here you've got multiple different options. This can be set up to run at the end of batch, every X minutes after a batch start. These predetermined options of every, let's say 45 minutes, 4 hours, at the end of every shift or at the start of every batch. So there's some predetermined options here, but for argument's sake here, let's click the X minutes after batch start. So now you have to input the trigger amount of minutes. So let's say that you want this to be performed every 10 minutes after the batch starts. The trigger thing here to delay when stopped decides whether these 10 minutes are continuous even when the line has stopped, or does this happen every 10 minutes of active production. So in this case, let's say we want this to happen every 10 minutes of active production. So we will say delay when stopped, meaning that this counter of every 10 minutes will be paused when the line is down. We then have to add a field. So this is going to be the label. So the label for this is going to be cooler temp. The help text here, if there's any extra information you want to give to an operator in terms of where they can locate the cooler temperature. Some of our customers like to input a video that shows how they can find the designated information. But for this instance, let's leave the help text blank, but you can give the operator more information should you want to. And then you have the type of field that the operator needs. So this could be a text field if you want them to input text. Could be weight, it could be automatically gathered from a sensor, and then your operators don't actually need to input this information at all because we can take this info directly from a sensor if we have it set up that way. But since this is a temperature check that we're doing manually, let's say this is a number. So then your operators are going to need to put in a lower limit and an upper limit should you have controls that you want to stay within. So let's set up these limits and say the lower limit is going to be, let's say 2, and the upper limit is going to be 5. So the cooler temperature needs to fall within these limits, or your operators are going to neither flag alarm or you will get a text alert if you have it set up to say that the temperature is outside of these limits. Then you can decide whether initials are required. You can say they need to put in their initials if always, no matter what they're doing, or only if it's outside of the limit, and therefore you want some attribution as to who has found that this is outside of the limit. But let's say this is always required. So now we're going to create that control, and now that control is set up in the system. And so every 10 minutes after the start of each batch, the operators will be prompted to check the cooler temperature.